everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of Mindcation. This is our third episode back here on season 3. This episode we want to dedicate to just kind of continuing the conversation based on everything that's been going on around us in our communities and in our country. It all got kicked off after the murder of George Floyd up in Minneapolis, and that kind of sparked up controversy across the nation. And here we are, 2 weeks later, and a week later. It feels like forever, but
it feels like forever for sure.
Here we are,
and worldwide now.
Yeah,
now there's protests all over. Yep.
At this point, it's worldwide. It's affecting us in our daily lives, and we wanted to utilize our platform and our voices to kind of, like I said, continue the conversation and allow ourselves to have a space where we can talk about this and not only speak to each other about it, but also speak to our listeners so they can kind of hear on why we think that it's important to have these kind of conversations, and why we encourage everyone to have these conversations within their own friend group and their own people, your own family, to continue to educate yourself and, try to see where these people are coming from. So first I want to thank all the boys here for joining and being so open to have this conversation, because like I said, it's not easy, and a lot of people aren't willing to. Even with everything going on, people are still kind of shying away from it, which is probably not the right thing to do, but each their own, I guess. As you see, Noah's camera and mic are muted. He is currently on a road trip down to see some family in Oklahoma, and he didn't want any feedback and stuff like that coming through. So he is here in the conversation. He is listening, and he'll chime in, but it might be a little quieter than normal. So just be aware of
it. Might.
Now it's chiming in already.
Yeah. I'll go back to muted in a second. I had talked to Irv a little bit earlier. This is probably going to be like a heavier podcast than we're used to. Not even heavier, but just more serious. And I thought about kind of removing myself from the conversation totally, just to give Irv a platform to speak. As I'd say that you're the most qualified and you've experienced these issues the most. But I don't know. I think that would be a bad visual, and just it would be bad of me to exclude myself from this conversation because of how important of a movement it is, and I don't want to minimize that. It's obviously something that needs to be talked about. People should be able to live in this country without fearing for their lives every day, every time they go out. So yeah, I thought about removing myself, but I think that it needs to be talked about. So yep, you guys get to put up with me in the car.
Mm-hmm. We're happy to have you. And I think it's important to not shy away, right? Like, I think a lot of people have thought like, oh, maybe I should not have these conversations. I can't really speak on it, so maybe I just shouldn't say anything, or I want to give the opportunity for somebody else to say something. And well, I think it is important to allow people of color to speak. It's also just important for white people and people who support the movement to be there, present, to hear these conversations. Because if people of color are just speaking to other people of color, I mean, we're kind of preaching to the choir. It's not the people that necessarily need to hear these conversations, right? And it's a lot more powerful when we have all these different groups of people come together and have these tough conversations. So again, I want to thank you guys for being here and being willing to be a part of this today.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things is to just stay informed about everything that's happening too. And I think having a good network of friends that keep each other informed. I know me and my good buddy Nick and like my cousin, we have always, like, whenever we see like a new video that we think really shocks us or that we think is information worth spreading, then we'll send it through our chats and stuff just to keep each other informed. And I think just being able to, the spread of information is what's going to help a lot.
I guess what I wanted to start with is just talking about why it's important to have these conversations in the first place. a phrase that's commonly used, they kind of hear a lot is, when you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it type of thing, right? And it almost feels like that's exactly what we're doing right now, right? Like we went through this multiple times throughout our history, and yet we're still here facing the exact same issues, still today. We think of the civil rights movement. We get taught about the civil rights movement, right? That happened in the '60s, and we're like, all right, cool, that ended everything. And little do we know, it didn't really do a whole lot, because people are still being murdered for things that shouldn't be. Police brutality is still a thing. Things might just not be as public, but all these instances are still happening. So for me, why I think it's important to have these conversations is because if we don't, then we're just doomed to keep going through these cycles of just constant constant repeating of the exact same mistakes that we do over and over again. And they're not easy, like I've said multiple times. Like, these conversations aren't easy, right? These aren't conversations that we want to have, right? Because
Well,
we
because
would like to just be over this whole thing, right? Like, we would just like to just be in 2020, we'd think we'd be in a better place, right? But we're just not. And we're doing a disservice if we're just going to sit back and not say anything. One thing I want to say real quick before I let the other guys speak a little bit was, if you're a white person, right, or even just a person of color that's not African American, reach out to your friends of color and check in on them. I think a lot of people think, specifically white people think, oh, I don't have any room to speak right now, so I'm just not going to say anything. And we notice, like, I know I've had two people reach out to me this whole time, right? Out of all my friends, out of all the people that I think are close to me, there's only two people that checked in and asked, hey, how are you feeling? I understand that I don't know what's going on, but let me see how you're feeling. How can I better educate myself? Where can I learn more? Like, can I talk with you and stuff like that? And like that, I like, until my first person reached out, I was like, I didn't even realize that I needed that as a person of color, of how much I wanted someone to just reach out. And still, still had very few people even reach out to me. And what I want to get across is, like, reach out to these people. If you're thinking, I don't know if I should, do it, because it shows that you support them in these times of trouble, right? Like, even if you can just say, like, I don't know what you're going through, and that's okay, because we don't expect you to know what we're going through, right? But we expect you to be there for us, just like in solidarity with us as our friends, as our loved ones, and for me, that, like, that been going through that has been pretty interesting, because it kind of shows. And like, look, it's scary, right? Like, you don't want to, like I said, it's not, you don't want to have these conversations, but to me, it shows so much if you're willing to put yourself out of your comfort zone to have this conversation. So again, this is why I appreciate these three right here, because they are willing to have these conversations with me and allow me to express myself, and kind of listen to me and hear me out. And I'm here to listen to them too and kind of help them through it as well, because we're all in this together. Like, I'm not African American, I'm Mexican American, but I like I put in some of my posts, like, I understand what it's like to grow up in this country as a person of color, because I am a bit darker than other people, and I know what that's like. And it comes with different prejudices, different obstacles that I've had to overcome, being an immigrant compared to being African American. But at the end of the day, like, my struggle is their struggle, right? Like, their struggle is my struggle. Like, I stand with them, because instead of being divided and being like, my struggle is worse than theirs, it's like, it's the same. Like we're all struggling through this prejudice and racism and oppression type of things that like I'm taking a back seat, right? Like I'm not worried about my immigrant things that I face. Is like I'm here with you because I don't believe in police brutality, right? Like I believe in justice and things like that. So thank you guys for being here to have these conversations, and I'll kind of let you guys speak on some stuff first before I keep going, because I will keep going.
Oh yeah. Do you want me to go? I always feel weird like just taking it. So yeah, I mean, just trying to do the most that I can as a white person. I would say just trying to learn. I mean, that's all I've really done the past like week since the George Floyd incident is just learn. Watched, which I highly recommend, Killer Mike's Netflix documentaries. Uh, Super powerful, and it's like really shows what Black people really do for the community, and I think that gets overlooked a lot. Like a lot of Black-owned businesses, the money gets returned right into the community, like way higher of a percentage of the time. And so, I mean, just making kind of commitments, like just even if you go out to eat once a week, try going to like a Black-owned place, you know. And so, just trying to like switch up schedules to help people, even though I'm already doing the same thing. But yeah, just trying to educate myself and educate other people. And like you said earlier, I tried to reach out to as many of my friends as I could. Just saying like, hey, if you need somebody to go protest with, I'm not trying to have any of my friends go alone or anything like that, because that's just not the way to go. And I think that's super important for everybody, just to have somebody to be there with. Even like when Irvin and I went to the Sunday protest, like we didn't talk a whole lot. I mean, it was very filled with emotion and kind of just along with the chants and just kind of uh, feeling everybody out and just being a part of the movement as itself. So, I mean, just being able to have people to do that with and stay safe with is very important. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with, I mean, everything Irvin and Isaac has said. And I really like how Irvin just said, the people who just don't want to speak out, it's like you can't forget about something like this. Like if you just keep on ignoring what's happening, it's going to keep on happening, and obviously it has. Like it's not going away anytime soon, and it's just like when it's dealing with deaths, it's like we're all human. No one deserves to die at the end of the day. And so it's being able to truly talk about it and be informed and continue to learn and ask questions. And just because you're one race doesn't mean you don't have a voice. Like you should always, I mean, we're all on this earth as one. Like we need to all support and help each other as much as we possibly can. And so continue to be informed, learn, and just always just help your friends and people out. I mean, at the end of the day, like you got to be there for people.
For sure.
And I think another small thing I'm going to add really quick too is that I know a lot of people in this, like, just like, I feel like I'm just repeating everything that I've seen on like Instagram and Facebook and everything. But like the silence from some people just really speaks volumes. I mean, it's just like a lot of the people that don't agree with like this whole movement and that are prioritizing the property damages over like the actual human lives, I think kind of speaks a lot about where some people's priorities are and where they think and like how their thought process goes about prioritizing things. I think it's a very important thing to note for people, and I think it's important to stay aware, for sure.
Yeah, money.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brock.
I mean, just to add on what Isaac said, money and monetary value can always be replaced. That there's always going to be that there, but someone's life and just rights in general, it's not. And it's just and it's for some people just super disrespectful on some of the things that they are saying and how they are acting. So it's just kind of sad. But
Yeah, I know. Over the last week and a half, my two main takeaways have one been, there are mass protests going on everywhere, and a lot of the media coverage that you're seeing is highlighting, like the looting and the rioting and that type of stuff. And I just think it's important for people to realize that that's 1% of what's going on with this movement, and that's that's what's going to grab the media's headlines. That's what's going to anyone that has anything to say against this movement is going to immediately point to that. But just for an example, the argument is 99% of cops are good and they do their job a good way. If 1% are bad apples. Well, this movement is the same way. 99% of people that are out there and speaking out are doing it for the right reasons and they're doing it the right way. And that 1% that is taking and seeing this as an opportunity to destroy property and loot and riot, they are seeing a good thing and they're using it as an opportunity to do bad things. So despite all the media coverage and everything you see on social media, that should not define this movement because that's 1% of it. And more videos are coming out every day where you see protesters stopping looting and stopping rioting and speaking out against that because that's not what it's about. And so I think it's important to try and get your news and stay informed from multiple sources because it's easy in today's day and age to get yourself in an echo chamber of news where if you're only watching Fox News or you're only watching CNN or right-wing media or left-wing media, they're going to tell you what you want to hear and you're going to just see that that's all it's going to be. You're not going to be well informed. And secondly, racism is hidden everywhere in this country. Other places are worse. Like Nebraska, there is racism in Nebraska. It might not be as open and flamboyant is not a great word, but out in the open as other places. And just growing up in the South and North Carolina is considered despite the name North Carolina is considered part of the Deep South. And I just learned that racism is like a deep-seated disease. Racism and hate. People that feel that way, that are racist, are raised that way. That's everything that they know. And so the important thing is that after the emotion and the intensity of these protests and these demonstrations wears off, we can't forget how important it is because this movement has enlightened so many people and has awakened so many people that want to see change. And the best way for that to happen is to be informed and to get out and vote. And not just vote for president. At the end of the day, your direct, congressmen and senators and, district officials have just as much control over what happens in your community. So, like I said, racism is not something that you're going to beat in a week. So this passion needs to carry over, and people need to stay informed, and people need to get out and vote and enact the change that they want to see. Because being honest, demonstrating is only going to do so much. There needs to be actual legislative changes and oversight, and the only way that's going to happen is if there's a mobilization of voters that are informed and want to see that change. So, yeah, those are my takeaways from this week.
Mm-hmm. No, yep. for sure. And you kind of started talking about what I wanted to go into next, and I wanted to speak on our perspective here from Nebraska because we're not a Chicago, we're not an LA, we're not a New York City, we're not a Houston. We're where there is a much larger, diverse population than we have here, right? And kind of what I want to speak on was talk about our perspective here in Nebraska, in Lincoln, Nebraska, where we can actually talk on because we live here, right? I feel like I see these things that go on in these other big cities, and I stand with them, but I can't speak to the exact same experiences that they face because I haven't faced that, right? I've lived in Nebraska. I've experienced what it's like here, so I'm gonna speak on what it's like to grow up here in Nebraska and the things that we face here, because I think living as a person of color in the middle of the country is a lot different than being a person of color living in the South, living in the coast. And I've never experienced that, so I'm not going to speak on that because I don't know. So I kind of want to transition into speaking about our experiences here in Nebraska, because the people that we talk to, the people that are going to listen to this podcast, we're all basically based out of here, right? There's not that many people that are going to be listening to us that are out of here. So let's speak on what we know. Let's speak on the things that we see on our day-to-day lives and here, because it is different. I mean, even Lincoln is different than in Omaha, right? We've seen a lot of things in Omaha go on here, with the passing of James Sherlock, and I think it's a tragic death. I think the report on how he passed away, on whether it was self-defense or not, or whatever the whole story is, it's so muddied. There's so many conflicting reports.
Okay, so I've this is like the one that I've like researched the hardest. Like I've watched the footage and like I've read all like articles from like both sides, and like it's still, he killed the guy. I mean, like he had a gun that was concealed and he didn't have a license for that. And I think for that alone, he should be. I mean, Omaha Police Department told him to stay home. And it's like, why are you gonna go out into your business and act tough and like try to like defend it with your hidden gun, like looking for a fight, and then just not go home and then replace a broken window or whatever, like if they happen to break that window? And that crowd looked fine, like peaceful, like they weren't running around like smashing anything or anything, and so it's just like he had other options and like he just didn't choose that path. And his history as far as like assaults and stuff too. I mean, this wasn't a guy that was just goody two shoes his whole life and trying to defend his life savings. I mean, he's done some things in the past too that I think should influence the decision more past something more punishing than self-defense. Just letting him go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the death is tragic, right? Like, I don't think his life had to be taken on that night, from what I've seen. And even, the fact that they didn't charge him on anything, right? Like, even the smallest thing, like his permit was expired, right? He shouldn't even have had the gun. And yet, nothing, like they're not doing anything about that. And I think the investigation is still ongoing, so still something could happen. So, we'll wait and see what happens with that situation, because we don't know. Was that life meaningful and too short? Yeah. I think there's definitely more, like his life didn't need to be taken away. And I hope that we see some justice for him. But at the end of the day, as of right now, we don't know what else is going to happen. So we just, I pray for his family and, for strength and peace for his family. And then hopefully, I pray for justice for him as well. But, I've seen a lot of people kind of talk about, it's like, oh, so this all happens outside of here, right? Like, this doesn't happen here in Nebraska. This doesn't happen here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Like, we're all friendly Midwesterners, like we treat each other the right way, type of thing. And
it's the second happiest city voted, apparently.
But probably
not anymore, but yeah.
But I just want to talk through a couple things here that happened here in our own backyard that people like to ignore and not acknowledge. And like the first thing that I want to hit on is, just because you as a white person have never seen someone be treated differently for their skin color doesn't mean that racism or oppression does not happen here in your own state. And because of two things. One, I think most people just don't realize it when they see it and are just oblivious to it because maybe you just don't interact with many people of color. And so you're just kind of blind to it, as sad as that sounds. Or two, you're in a community that's mainly predominantly white where you don't see other people that you know interact with people of color, right? And so obviously you're not going to see them treat anybody else differently because they never have to, right? Because I've seen people talk about that. It's like, well, I don't know anybody close to me that would treat someone else differently because of their skin color, right? And to me, I think like, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe they wouldn't, but also you're probably not in a situation where you have to see what they're like when they're in a thing like that, right? And treating someone differently by their skin color isn't just by saying slurs to them, like racial slurs to them, right? Or like saying things outright, right? It can be feeling nervous when you're walking by them in the grocery store, right? Or keeping your eyes on them when they're walking on the opposite street as you, right? Because you feel uneasy, right? Or it's turning the other way because you don't want to walk by someone, right? Like there's plenty of other actions that can be taken that are outside of just verbal language. There's a lot of things that can be done by our body language as well, or even just the thoughts that we have that you're not even recognizing that you're having. Just even, and I know Noah was still working at the rec when this happened, right? With our first GA that we had, Corbin Ross, he was an African American male. There was an incident that happened in the weight room where one of the patrons was talking to one of our attendants, and then Corbin came out. He was just talking to the attendant, and then he was gonna introduce himself to the patron as he's a very friendly person and just kind of likes to meet people. Stood, extended his hand out for a handshake, and the guy just looked at him and just shook his head no, right, and then walked away. And things like that still happen here. And I don't think he's from Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken. But later on, we came to find out he went to some white supremacist rallies down in what was it, Virginia? I don't even remember.
Virginia, Charlottesville.
Yeah, with Charlottesville. Yep. And he had posted various content saying how he hated people of color and stuff like that. I had that dude in my lab for biology, right? So like that was hella awkward, and I had to exchange words with him, right? And like I was uneasy type of thing, and but
well, and sorry to interrupt her.
No,
but,
go ahead.
And so Dan Cleve is his name. I have no problem saying it because he's scum of the earth, and I think people should know who he is because he's people like that do nothing but regress society. I was lucky enough to have a unique perspective. One, because I worked at the rec when that happened, and I was very, very close to Corbin. Corbin is one of the nicest and most stand-up people you'll ever meet, and to be disrespected the way he was for the color of his skin is, it upsets, it pisses me off even to this day. I know when me and Irv talked about it, I wanted to be there because I would have lost my job if I was standing there when that guy did that to Corbin. But I also was working with the basketball team at the time, and obviously when it became public that there was a white supremacist on campus, and the university was very slow to even speak on it, let alone react to it. So our basketball team, which is predominantly black, felt they needed to make have a message, and they had a team meeting, and I know that a lot of them were affected very personally by it, and they started the Hey We'll Never Win campaign, and it had shirts, and I know there were rallies and stuff like that on campus, and it was really cool to be a part of that. Just reaffirmed that and not everybody sucks. There's still people that are good and willing to give a platform, and Coach Miles happily allowed the team to go about it in whatever way they wanted to. And I don't know, really proud to be a part of that. But yeah, that's a good example that, you know, shows that just because you don't see it doesn't mean that Nebraska is perfect.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, that was an interesting time to be on campus. You know, with the Hate Will Never Win campaign, we had a Black Lives Matter rally on campus during that time. I believe, I don't remember if it was I think it was our sophomore year when that happened. But yeah, all that stuff. I think the rally was our freshman year.
I think the Dan Cleve thing was our junior year.
Yeah, that was junior year. And the rally was freshman year after what was going on in Ferguson.
Yeah.
So that was, you know, we had a chance to experience more of those type of movements on our campus, more than a lot of people get the opportunity to. At least here at Nebraska. And yeah, I remember when we had that Black Lives Matter rally, you know, I was there and it was all peaceful and stuff, but there were still people on the edges of the rally, you know, trying to instigate things, trying to still say, you know, kind of dumb things, you know, racist things, you know, just.
Well, am I wrong, or maybe not for that rally? Did the Westboro Baptist Church show up at some point?
I think
maybe not.
I think they were saying they were going to, or maybe they did afterwards.
Yeah.
There was something with that too.
There was like an anti rally, you know what I mean, like an opposing rally at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But and obviously, I mean, that got zero traction on the at the university. But yeah, I was just trying to remember if that was something that I made up in my head or if that was actually reality.
No, that was a real threat. I remember there was a lot of people speaking up saying to be careful because we didn't know if there was going to be that opposing rally to happen. So yeah, no, that was definitely something that did come to fruition as far as a threat goes. But then another thing, like, you know, just thinking back to when Colin Kaepernick was started doing his kneeling, right, against police brutality, and the whole narrative was that he was doing it, that he was disrespecting the flag and he was disrespecting the military, right? And that's kind of what that conversation revolved around, and that's what most people believed here in Nebraska that I engaged with, at least like white people, right? They all thought like, oh, he's just disrespecting my flag, he's disrespecting my country, my military, like my grandpa was in the military and things like that. Because people in the Midwest, a lot of people have family members who were part of the military, right? And so they felt disrespected, and a lot of people felt like that protest was wrong, right? Like they're taking a knee was wrong, and they failed to just step out of that for a second and see what the message was about, right? It was about police brutality. It was about what was going on at the time, you know, with Ferguson, with Trayvon Martin, things like that were going on back then that are still going on now. And, you know, he was peacefully protesting. It's not like he was inciting riots, things like that, right? He was peacefully taking a knee to demonstrate, like, I will stand up when my flag represents what it should. And I'm not disrespecting the military. I'm not disrespecting the people who have sacrificed their lives for this country. You know, I forget who the military member is that he spoke to, because he wanted to do it in a non-disrespectful way, right? And that's what they told him, is like, take a knee, right? Like, because it's still honoring those who fell for the flag, but he's also still standing with the whole, I'm not standing for a flag that doesn't represent what I think it should. And during that time, you know, there were players here at Nebraska that were, you know, behind that message and wanted to take a knee and were allowed to take a knee, right? And there was so much outrage from the state of Nebraska, right? So many Nebraska fans saying, just stand up, just play your game. You're an athlete, you're already privileged. You know, you don't have the right to protest these kind of things. And to me, that showed a lot of true color, right? Like people are trying to peacefully protest against something that you should be protesting about too, and yet you're more mad that he's taking a knee, right? Like that. Like there were people that wanted these athletes to be expelled. You know, that they shouldn't even be on campus. And as a person of color who was here at this campus, I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't be here because, you know, I believe in that too. And that was an interesting time to go through, right? Like this has all happened just during my college experience, right? Like people being outraged for the wrong reasons. And I always say, go ahead.
The most ironic thing about that is that everyone that was outraged about Kaepernick, whether you agree with the method of protest or not, you know, the thing that makes that flag great and the thing that makes America great is that it represents freedom to speak and live and protest how you want, how you see fit. And to argue that him kneeling is disrespectful to that, no, he is acknowledging the rights that he receives from that flag, you know. Mm-hmm. and it's very ironic to be okay with your thoughts and how you feel something should be done and be totally against someone else's because you don't feel that that's the representation of the flag. But that's exactly what the flag stands for. And I just think that message is being spread now more effectively than it was then. You know, just because you feel strong about something doesn't mean that you're right. So,
well, and I also feel like people are just super quick to just come up with something in their head and then say, oh, well, that's wrong because of this, that, and that. And they don't take the time to be like, okay, why is he actually doing this? Is he actually disrespecting anything? Which is no. He's just, like Irvin said, he's just very much standing up for him and his community and just the community in a whole. And it's just people like, I mean, and especially in Nebraska, like they're I mean, very silently racist because they like will say things and come up with things very quickly in their heads and not think about the whole picture. So.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I always think that Nebraska is one of those states that's far behind the curve on most things, right? Like, and I think just even having the race talks, Nebraska is not very forward in that, right? Like they're very uncomfortable still speaking to that. And because Nebraska is not a very diverse state, people like to claim that it is, but it's not, right? Like the university likes to claim that it's diverse, yet, you know, its minority population is only 12%, right? Like it's an 88% white institution. Like, yeah, you might have one person from 165 countries, but if you only have one person, like, does that really make it diverse? Like, I don't think so. Like, but I kind of lost my train of thought of where I was going with that. But yeah, just having these conversations, like in Nebraska, it's like the world is becoming more and more that diverse the older we get, right? Like, and if you're not willing to have these conversations now, it's going to be a lot harder to have them in the future. And you're going to be forced to eventually because our country's going in that way of just being so diverse that you're going to have to be open to having these conversations. And if you're not, then like you're just going to get stuck in the past.
Well, yeah, and I think an important thing too is that people need to experience that diversity. We all know it's easier to identify and to be empathetic to a movement that you are personal, you know, that you have a personal attachment to. So I know, just in terms of, you know, talking of like Brock said, how like silent racism here in Nebraska, just, you know, so coming from North Carolina, where I went to a high school, you know, a town similar to the size of Seward where I live now, but my high school was split 50-50, so 50% white and then 50% black and Hispanic. And we had members of the community from, we had like people that grew up on a farm their whole life, low income, medium income, people that came from inner city. So it just was about as diverse of an environment as you can get in terms of, you know, a high school in North Carolina. And then, you know, when I moved to Nebraska, I was blown away because, you know, in 1 year in Seward, I heard people say the N-word more than I did in my 12 years in North Carolina, because I think I had one African American student at my high school in Seward. Here's the deal, you know, if you're in North Carolina, if I was at my high school in North Carolina and you caught me saying that, I'm getting my ass kicked. Like I personally have, you know, I have African American friends, I have Hispanic friends. You say something like that, someone of that color, such a derogatory term, you know, there's going to be an issue. Then I moved to Seward, you know, a school that's a quarter of the size, with one African American student, and, you know, people felt like they had a pass to say whatever they wanted because there wasn't anyone there to check them. So I know whenever I heard it, I was always like, have you ever met or spoke to a black person in your life? And the answer is like, you know, 90% of the time is no. And it's like, so one, why are you saying that word anyway? But two, like, what gives you any sort of like ground to have an opinion about this, say that word, any of it? And so just in the place that's less diverse like that, I feel like people feel like they get a pass because there's not anyone looking over their shoulder. You know what I mean? There's not like, you know, if you say the N-word in the halls, you're not going to, an African-American kid walking by is not going to accidentally hear it. So it's like they think, well, if no one that it directly affects hears it, then you know, it's fine if I say it, which is absolutely wrong and not the case. But that just kind of perpetuated that stigma that, you know, there is racism in Nebraska. Just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean that it's not true, you know?
No, I agree. And I think that goes along with what I was saying with like, yeah, like we keep saying, like, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And a lot of times because no one, like Noah was saying, no one keeps them in check, right? No one is willing to stand up and be like, hey, why are you saying that? Or like why are you doing this type of thing? Because one, they don't feel like they can, or two, because they don't feel like they'd have to, or like they need to, right? Like I feel like a lot of people here in Nebraska are very kind of oblivious to these things, right? Like to them, it's like, oh, it's whatever, but it's like, no, that's like not okay. Like,
and to quote a very famous book, ignorance is bliss. So just want to add that.
Exactly. Ignorance is bliss. Is like, if you,
hey, what book is that, Isaac?
Isn't it 1963?
I don't know. I just think you knew the book.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's the book with like a Big Brother and all that stuff. I think it's 1964. It's a date. I know that. But
you just said to quote a very famous book, and then you didn't list the book, so I was going to.
Yeah,
you're trying to catch you slipping.
No. That's good. Yeah, you got to keep me accountable. That's good. No. I'm pretty sure 1964. Read it in high school. Great book. Highly recommend.
All right, just making sure.
It's about government overstepping privacy boundaries, and then one of the famous quotes from the government in the book is "Ignorance is bliss," keeping people ignorant because it's blissful for them, and then government gets anyway.
But yeah, you know, like people just aren't willing to stand up and like tell someone, no, that's not right, right? And there's even now in college, like people are still not willing to tell someone when they're obviously doing something wrong, because they still feel like they still get that pass that Noah kind of talking about, because they come from these communities where they never even got exposed to a person of color. So how do I expect them to even start thinking about those things now in college? I hope that they do, but I mean, I'd be naive to think that they're right away gonna embrace the whole kumbaya of I'm gonna know everybody and, you know, accept everybody for who they are, because they never had to. So it takes a while to be willing to. So yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought of where else I was going. So someone else wants to say something.
Yeah, so the one of the things that like the main topic that I wanted to kind of like say before we closed or whatever is I assume you've all seen the video of Trump's ad where he's walking to the church and then he is holding the Bible and stuff.
Yep.
But did you
Yep.
guys also see what the like Secret Service and like everybody had to do to clear the protesters out? Like it was like one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. Like they all had like riot shields and they literally just charged all these like 100% peaceful protesters on public land, and it's just like they just didn't have to do that, you know. And it's just like they were like tossing reporters, and then there's reporters getting arrested other places, and like even shot with rubber bullets. I mean, rubber bullets aren't like very fun to get shot with. Like they still do lots and lots of damage. Especially like I've seen some horrific images of people getting shot in the head and stuff, and it's like you can do very insane skull fractures, or if you get caught in the eye directly, I mean you're going blind. So
the media is doing all they're doing is they're showing that 1% of the people of the businesses that are getting vandalized, but they're also not really showing that much of like how brutal the police are, kind of like what tear gas actually does to you, what those rubber bullets do to you. Like both sides are, I mean, causing violence, and I feel like it's just been very much one-sided on what the media's been showing.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what I mean by like the beginning of my talk is having that good network of information. Because if people don't see this video, then it's just going to go right under the rug and getting forgot about. And I think that video alone shows really the lengths that Trump's trying to go to just to create a nice, beautiful looking ad, right? To just storm on these peaceful protesters, and like they broke this cameraman's like camera and like pushed him all around, and like people are falling and I'm assuming getting injured just so that he can get a cool ad for something that's senseless for the White House website. Like it's just so dumb to me.
And I'm curious too, because, and I don't know if this is, you know, how high up this is coming from or the reasoning for this, but this is one of the first times in American history where you're seeing widespread arrests and detainment of media members who are displaying passes and you know, are identifying themselves as media and are still being arrested. I mean,
wearing like jackets too, like reflective, like clear ass, like.
Yeah, well, and then you know the video with the CNN correspondent getting arrested on live on CNN, and he's a person of color, and I don't know, you know, if you're upset about Colin Kaepernick or anyone disrespecting the flag, there is nothing more disrespectful to the flag or to the United States of America, to the Constitution, than denying anyone their First Amendment rights. And that's direct, you know, by arresting and detaining the media, like that's shit that happens in China and Russia. That's not shit that's supposed to happen in America, and it is. And I don't know, you know, the easy explanation would be that, you know, that you know, it's coming from Trump, who obviously just doesn't give a crap. But you know, I don't know that for sure. That's what it would seem like. But that's the scariest part about it too, where you're starting to see some of these tactics that are anti-American, really. Yeah, so it's just it's a scary time, and it's a scary time. And the Black Lives Matter movement and those protesters are not at fault for it being a scary time. It's you know, I don't view them as the agitators.
And like the whole trying to quiet the media or arresting lots of media people and stuff like that. You know, that's the very same things that we as a country claim to fight in other countries, right? Because we're like, no, you shouldn't shut the people up, right? You should let them express themselves. And yet we're always so unwilling to do that in our own countries, right? Like a lot of people, you know, especially going back to the flag thing, you know, they'll say like, you know, my dad, my grandpa, my great grandpa fought in these wars, right? to defend the flag. You shouldn't disrespect it. And I agree, you shouldn't disrespect the flag, but I don't think this is disrespecting the flag, right? How many soldiers of color came back to a nation that looked a lot like the nation they just fought to free, right? And they had to come and be oppressed the same way they just freed people, right? Especially back in World War II, right? Like they fought the Nazis and the oppression of their right, kind of establish peace again. They fought the hate that was going on, and those same people came back to being told, oh, you can't go to these places, they're whites only, right? Like, oh, you can't go to these schools, they're white only, right? They still came back to segregation. They still came back, and they didn't get the benefits of the other white soldiers, right? Like they didn't get the compensation and things like that because they were people of color, and they weren't, like, that just wasn't allowed yet, right? Like, so when you think that, oh, my grandpa or a family member fought for this country, it's like, yeah, you're right, they did, and we appreciate their service, but you got to see how many other people of color also fought for this country, right, to defend its freedom, to gain no freedom, to gain nothing from it, right? Like they went to fight for freedom for another country and came back to not be free, right? So you tell me how that makes sense, type of thing. One last thing that I wanted to hit on was the whole aspect of faith in this movement, and as a response to what's going on. Look, I grew up Catholic. I grew up in a very religious home. I can't say that I'm still as active as I was when I was growing up, but I still have faith, and I still believe in God, and I believe in his teachings. And just one thing that just hasn't sit with me right throughout this whole thing is people that just say, "Oh, I'll pray for these things to, for peace to come," and all they'll do is just post a little bit, and just focus on like God will change us and things like that. Like, look, I understand the power of prayer, right? I've witnessed it firsthand. I still pray myself, but if you don't take part of the movement actively as well, like nothing's gonna happen. Like, it's not just enough for you to say, "I'll pray for you," right? From what I've been taught is, people say, "What would Jesus do?" It's like, yeah, you're right. Would he be out rioting? No, obviously not, right? But he would extend his hand and ask how he could help, right? He wouldn't just say, "I'll pray for you," and call it good, right? Jesus was just in the midst of everything, right? Like he would go, cure people. He would go teach in the midst of everything that was going on. He wasn't on the outside looking in, telling people from the outside what to do, right? Like he wasn't just saying, "Oh, I'll pray for you," and call it good. Like, no, he was helping his fellow man, right? And I want to go back, like, I understand the power of prayer, and I think it's important to pray in these times of uncertainty. But I also think you shouldn't use that as an excuse to not do anything else. And if you don't know what else to do, then reach out and try to find out what you can do. Because I just don't understand the people that can call themselves to whatever religion they believe in, right? And then say, this is all I'm going to do, and I'm not going to extend a hand to see how else I can help. Because you're not demonstrating what you believe in by just doing that, right? Like, one thing that always sticks in my mind is, like, in the teachings that I've learned, it's like God wants you either all in or all out. He doesn't want you lukewarm, right? He doesn't want you in the middle of like, I don't know. So by just saying, "Oh, I'm going to pray for you," and call it good because I don't know if I should do more or not, you're being the exact thing they say not to do. It's like you're either all in or you're all out. So I appreciate the people that are spreading love and, prayer, because I think that's important. But I also want to say, like, don't let that be the only thing you do, right? even if it's just having these conversations like these guys are doing with me, right? Like, or even just talking about it, just educating yourself, or even by attending a rally or donating, whatever you think you can do, then do that too, because that's how we're going to see change as well, right? Like, I think with some people that whose hearts are filled with hate, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe God's the only one that can change their heart for better. But there's power in action as well, right? Like, God doesn't just teach you to pray and call it good, right? He wants people of action as well. So that's kind of one other thing I wanted to hit on as well. And I know Isaac's not really a religious person, and I don't know how he feels about that whole thing. But I don't know what else, if you guys had any comments on that aspect.
Nope, absolutely. I mean, like, I think that praying's not going to hurt anything. I mean, all it can do is good, even if it's on the individual level or even just by the masses. And I agree with everything that you said, that it's just not enough just to pray. But to actually go out and help the community and help the cause is the most important thing that you can do. So.
Oh yeah, you hit it right on the head again. There's really, it's good that you have a belief system and that, you are hoping for the best, but at the same time, you have to take action as well and have to try to make a change and be active and actively want to make a change.
Mm-hmm. One thing, it's like, people like to quote Martin Luther King Jr., right? Like, all he did, and like say, oh, he did things peacefully and stuff like that. And like, we're going back to the faith thing. He was a pastor, right? Like, he spread the word of the Lord, but you didn't see him just being on the outside, just praying and calling it good, right? He didn't just lead a church service and call it good, right? He was out there marching with the people, right? He was standing up for the people. He didn't just say, Lord, help these people, and that's it, right? He walked the walk. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. And I feel like that seems to be lost with some people that just say, I'll pray for you and see you later type of thing.
Right.
Noah, you got any thoughts on that? I don't know if he might be.
Yeah, like Brock said, you kind of hit it on the head. I grew up Catholic too, and you're right. Prayer is powerful, but this isn't a religious issue. This isn't a man and God issue. This is a group of people being denied basic human rights. So, like you said, while prayer can't hurt, there's no substitute for action in this circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've kind of been going on with this conversation for a while. We could probably keep this conversation going for a while if we really wanted to. And there's plenty of things I would love to kind of talk about, whether it's like the history of how people have been so oppressed, and we can talk about redlining and things like that people aren't really aware that are going on. But
or even the statistics of Black women's death in hospitals giving birth.
Mm-hmm. There's just
Crazy.
there's so many things that we could talk about, right? And but I think the message of this podcast that we wanted to release was just the importance of initiating these conversations and why it's important to even have these conversations, right? Because we think they're crucial. We think they're crucial in furthering us along as a human race, right? To help us come together in this time, and I have a lot of friends who are white who don't know what to do and don't think that they should do anything. And to those people, I say, do something, even if it is just talking. Like, something is better than nothing. Like, you don't have to go to rallies if that's not your thing. Cool, donate to things, right? Just educate yourself on things. So yeah, just take action. Like, there's nothing else worse than not doing anything. So yeah, I don't know if
not to cut you off, Irv.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm about to lose some reception here, and so I just wanted to say just make sure everyone stays informed. Appreciate you guys for listening, and if I cut out here, that's why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of done. I was just kind of see if you guys had any final words. If not, we can let the people go educate themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
And
that's the biggest thing.
I know I put lots of stuff on my personal story, information that I find interesting or information, anything that I come across that I deem worthy that I think other people should see. I try to put it up as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. Brock, any final words from you?
Just, I mean, keep on getting out there, keep on learning, stay informed. And, I mean, we have to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to figure out as a community what we can do. And so that's why getting out there and asking questions and not being afraid to talk about it, doing things like this, talk about it in your groups and stuff like that.
And don't be afraid to stand up too.
Because I mean that's how this keeps on happening.
Mm-hmm.
Is people are too afraid to talk about it and then they just want to forget about it or ignore it, and that's not how you handle things at all.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Well, like we said, thank you guys for listening. We hope that through this you were able to get a few things out of it, and hopefully it has made you want to start a conversation as well. If you don't feel comfortable talking with other people, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to have these conversations with you as well. We're building that family along here too. So, we want to help in whatever way we can. So please stay informed, stay active, and, spread some love and spread some understanding. And, we appreciate you guys again for listening, and thank you all, and have a wonderful week, and hopefully we'll see you guys again next week.
In fact.
Oh.